Welcome to the Ghost of the Orange Bowl. I'm Jay Rao. Our guest is a Dade County coaching legend. He first established himself as head coach at Southridge High School, where he took the Spartans to 4 state championship games. But Miami Hurricane fans will always remember him as the running backs coach who sent a pipeline of running backs to the NFL, including Hall of Famer Edgerrin James. Welcome to our show, Don Soldinger. Don, Coach, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. I'm really glad to be here.
Now, one of the things that strikes me about you is that you're what the kids today would call an OG. You were born in Miami. You were raised in Miami. Miami has been a part of your life from the get-go. What is it about this town and what you growing up in Miami? What are some of the changes that you've seen over the years?
Oh, it's changed a lot. I went to high school at Southwest, and I was actually born in Miami Beach, I just love the town. I always have loved the town. And, once you develop a reputation in the town, so many people know you. I was like telling you just before we started that Mr. Rebhand, who is in our neighborhood, in my neighborhood, recognized me. I was getting my car washed, and we talked about his son who coached, baseball at Palmetto, that type of thing. You always know somebody. And, I kind of stayed here. And then my wife had a real good business here at the time. So when I took the job at Miami, I was coaching in high school for many years. And she had her own business, mortgage company. And, we acquired some real estate and things like that. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to stay. I didn't want to up and move the family and go from one place to another. Because Jimmy offered me to come out to Dallas, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave. So
wow.
I just stayed, and I had it, I just loved Miami, and I was a Miami guy, and loved it. That's why I stayed here,
I mean, when you were growing up as a kid, you came from a time when the natives used to call it Miami.
Yeah.
Do you remember those days?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It used to end at 80, if you go out where Baptist Hospital is, 87th Avenue, once you passed 87th Avenue, you're almost in the Glades when I was growing up. I mean, that was really, there was dirt roads out there. We used to have parties in high school at South Miami Riding Academy, which was on like 97th Avenue. And it was a dirt road to get back there, and that was, and of course, Baptist is on 87th. It just changed. The whole dynamics of the town changed. It was a small town, especially the athletic community was a small town, when we were growing up. So it's changed quite a bit. It's still small athletically, though. People, like you, we were talking, and you're really well versed in athletics in Miami. It's a small town, really, but not anymore. It's gotten big, but I still love it. I still love Miami. There's a lot to enjoy here.
Right. When did you get started as in sports? How did you get involved when you were a kid in sports?
I grew up. There's on 37th Avenue and 16th Street was the Coliseum. I don't know if you were ever familiar with that. It might have been a bowling alley when you were growing up. Now it's a Publix, but when I was growing up, I grew up in the duplexes right there on 16th Street. And right across the street was the Coliseum. And behind the Coliseum was where you played baseball, football, things like that. And so I started playing ball there, behind the Coliseum. And one of my first coaches was Red Cameron. Oh. And his son, Glenn, played at Gables and then went on to play, I think, at Cincinnati. Was a pro football player. But anyway, that's where I started playing ball. I started playing soccer and football and baseball behind the Coliseum. Then I started going to the Gables Youth Center, which was right behind the Miracle Theater. It wasn't where it is now. And that's the way I started playing. I just started playing ball there, and I'd get up in the morning and just walk across the street. We were right across the street from, I was right there on 16th and like 34th Street. And this was 37th. I walked 3 blocks and I was ready to go, take my stuff. And I just grew up playing ball right there.
Is it true Ron Frazier was the director at that time?
Yes. When I first started at the youth center, Ron Frazier was the director. He had just gotten a job. Maybe had just graduated from Miami or been involved with Miami. And Ron Frazier was the guy. at the youth center.
Wow.
Sure was.
You went to Southwest High School back in the early 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and you played for a guy named Joe McNulty.
Yep.
And McNulty was like the first ever football coach at Southwest High. Looking back, now that you've been a coach,
Right.
how would Don Soldinger, the coach, describe Don Soldinger, the player?
I was okay. You know, I was okay as a player. I wasn't great. I was like honorable mention All City or second team All City, something like that. But Joe McNulty was a big influence in my life too. He's a disciplined guy. He was actually assistant principal at Carl Park when I started, teaching there. And he's a great guy, a very disciplined guy. They weren't great coaches. You know, they didn't put in the time that we put into it. But I tell you, he was very influential in my career growing up. And I was a football junkie. I loved football, and I played both ways. And I was just another guy, a jag. I was good, but not great.
Wow. I mean, I remember in the Billy Corbin documentary, you had mentioned that back in your day, high school football was so big in Miami that it often outdrew the University of Miami. Teams like Miami High, Coral Gables, Jackson, Edison, all drew 20, 30,000, maybe even 40,000 for a big rivalry game at the Orange Bowl. What was it like in those days, high school football?
I went to a game I'll never forget. I think it might have been Gables Edison. It was at the Orange Bowl, 55,000 people. I was in the upper deck. I couldn't find a seat down in the lower deck. That's how many people were there. I mean, high school football was the thing. Miami High each year used to bring in like a team from Massachusetts. You know, they would bring outside teams, you know, from other places. As a matter of fact, when I was at Southridge, the year I left, I had set up a game. I had the AD set up a game with Massillon, Ohio, because I was so impressed with Miami High. They used to go out and bring in great teams from outside and play in the Orange Bowl, you know, at the end of the season. I was at a national convention. And I saw ad, you know, want to play a ranked opponent in high school. So I pulled that ad off and gave it to the AD, and that's when Guandolo got the job, and they went up and played Massillon, and I think they beat them. They went up and beat them up there. Yeah, and that's just something I really kind of miss. Matter of fact, as we were riding into the Hall of Fame, you know, I just got back from camp, so I wanted to be at Jimmy's and Edgerton's induction ceremony. I was looking, I said, man, that's what we missed, Phyllis. I said, we could have been at Massillon, Ohio. So we were, you know, I missed that game, but I set it up before I left. But yeah, it's the high school football here. It was kind of the thing. Miami didn't draw. I remember some Miami games would only have like 10,000, 12,000, 17,000. And the high school games would be 34, 40. I mean, it was a little bit different.
Oh, wow. When did you realize that you were going to be a coach someday?
I guess when I finally decided, you know, I started out as going to be a carpenter. I got my, I was in the carpenters union, and I was doing poured concrete work here in the summer. And a good Jewish boy doesn't like that, you know. I tell you what, that was kind of rough. I'd come home, I was filthy, you know, and I was making good money. And I was getting ready to be a carpenter. And I said, no, let me try to play again. I got hurt in high school. I had a bad concussion in high school against one of the teams we played, and I wasn't able to take a scholarship. The doctor suggested I not play. And then after a while, I got rechecked, and they said, they gave me the go ahead. And so I looked up C.W. Post. It's a small school, private school on Long Island. I was going to play there. And so I sent a film up there, and they were going to come up with a quarter scholarship. That's all they could afford. And I couldn't afford it. It was kind of like the University of Miami back then, very expensive. And I had the money from working as a carpenter. So I went there for a semester and then decided to transfer. And I went to Memphis State, and that's when I started. I majored in PE and realized I really liked coaching then. And when I came back, Joe McNulty hooked me up with Frank Downing at Coral Park, and the rest is history.
Yeah, Coral Park. That's where it all started, your first ever job. What was that like? You were probably at that time barely older than your players.
23. I was 23. I still keep in touch with him. Matter of fact, I just went to a thing they had that I think it was a '72 team. It was a pretty good team at Carl Park. But yeah, I wasn't very much older. And Frank Downing was a great guy to learn from. He was a great teacher. Wasn't necessarily successful as a coach, but a great teacher. And he used to have, matter of fact, in the off season, he used to bring in guys. Walt Krzyzewski came in and lectured us on defensive end play. He coached at Miami. Doc Story was a kicking coach, came in and talked about punting. Frank always had something. And a lot of the older coaches, thought he was a pain in the neck.
Right.
I loved it. I was learning football and I was doing, it's really where I cut my teeth in football. So I love Frank. I mean, Frank was a big influence. As a matter of fact, he just passed away. He was living in Maryland and just passed away. And it's funny that you talk about that. Barry Smith, who played there, played for Green Bay Packers,
Florida State,
just texted me, and he texted a picture of me at UM. He says, "Remember, you started at Carl Park. Just got it today. Just got the text today." So, I keep in touch with Barry and I keep in touch with some of those guys. But that's where I cut my teeth in coaching and really started moving from there.
You were also the school's head track and field coach.
Yeah,
too.
I loved it. I loved it. I was at the time, it was before really the integration. We were basically all white, and we were the other than Jackson and Northwestern, we were the third best track team in the city. I mean, we had some great track athletes. I had a hurdler that I took out to the Golden West when Reuben Carter won the shot put. I think threw something like 62-10. Won the shot put, and he was invited to the Golden West. And I took a hurdler out there that broke the state record. He ran a 19.2 in the low hurdles at the time, and we went out to the Golden West track meet. I was pretty successful as a track coach.
Now, we were talking earlier about your days as a kid growing up in Miami, and one of the things about Miami back in those days is that it was a segregated city at that time. But were you aware of like the kids from the black schools, for example, like Mays High School and Carver High School? Did you know about those guys, and did you ever interact with them?
We played. It just started in '62. I graduated in 1962 from Southwest, and Carroll Williams, who was an administrator here
Curly
for years, and he played at Curly, and there was another guy that played with him. They played against us. They were the first black kids that really played against the white schools. So but I knew they had a great sprinter at Dade North, and you knew some of the kids, and of course Traz Powell and all these guys that you knew about them. But at the time, Gables and Miami High, were more of that's where the headlines were.
Right.
But you knew about them. Matter of fact, I went to I watched Bob Hayes run like a 9.400 on they had a cinder track at Miami with a 220 straightaway, and Bob Hayes ran a 100-yard dash there that I saw. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, the black athletes and the black schools didn't. It's sort of like now, you don't see a lot of news like with even high school sports now.
Right.
You don't see a lot. But back then it was all high school sports, a little bit University of Miami. That's what it was when I was growing up.
I was looking at the rich lineage of Dade County football. You coached Willis McGahee, obviously, but I was looking at an old all-city team from 1966, and Willis's dad, Willis McGahee,
Played the Gables.
Played at actually he played at like Mays or Carver.
There was another McGahee that played at Gables. Yeah, it might have been his uncle.
Yeah.
His dad played all the way back then
in the 60s.
Yeah, and then his mom actually. My defensive coordinator when I first started at Southridge was Norman Gross.
Right.
And Norman was coached at Jackson for years. Coached Arnie Weather, coached some really good ball players, and he coached Willis's mom. So anytime I had trouble with Willis, I'd just call Janie, and she'd take care of it. Because she was the boss. But yeah, and then other McGahees, another McGahee played at Gables, was a real good running back. I didn't know his dad had played at Carver Probably played at Carver.
I think he went to Carver and then transferred to Mays.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. But,
that's interesting.
after Coral Park, you went to Killian, and you worked under Chris Vagatis, I think.
Yes,
right?
I did.
What was that like?
Did. That was, well, actually, it's funny. He tried to get me to come the year before. I was at Coral Park working with Carl Mosso, and he tried to get me to come there before. And Fred Cooley, who was coaching at Coral Park, was already at Killian, and I was really tight with Fred Cooley. And matter of fact, I just saw him. He lives in Deltona. He's like 94, I think. And I decided to go. I decided to go to Killian. And of course, Killian had some great athletes. They had the Richmond High crew, and they had some real good athletes. And I went there, and we were like 9-1, for the 2 years I was there, and 6-4 the middle year. But I coached defense with Fred. I went with Chris, and it was great. I loved it. It was great athletes, a lot of speed, and we were pretty good. And then the Southridge job opened up, and I applied for it.
In 1976, Miami Southridge High School opened, but you were not the original head coach. It was actually a gentleman named Darryl Cox, who was a legendary player back in the day in Edison High School. But Darryl had some legal issues at the time, and luckily for you, an opportunity came open. What was that like, taking over as the head
This
man?
is an interesting story, because I applied for the head job. And Bobby Carlton was a head coach at Miami High at one time. He was the AD, and Joe Teckerman came from Jackson. He was the guy there. They interviewed me, and they interviewed Darryl Cox. Now, Darryl Cox was a legend. Darryl Cox was a great athlete. I watched Darryl play high school ball, and stuff like that. He played at Kentucky. Great athlete, and they wound up giving him the job. And the kids loved him at Southridge the first year. They really, really liked him. And he had some good players. He had the Perrine kids and the Gould's kids and some of the South Miami Heights. He had a good nucleus to draw from. And then he got in some kind of, problem. And it was in the summer, and I get a call from a guy that was at Killian with me, Herb Corris, and Freddie Burnside, who's a baseball coach, who was a baseball coach at Southridge. He's at South Dade now. Matter of fact, he won a state championship at South Dade. And they call me up and says, hey, Darryl Cox, is not going to be coaching. They're looking for a head coach. Do you want the job? I said, no, I don't want the job. I said, they had a shot at me the first time. I didn't want to take it. So I wasn't going to take it. They finally talked me into it. They finally talked me into the job. And, I took the job, and we went off to the races from there.
It's amazing. You took a program that was pretty much brand spanking new, and you established a winning culture relatively quickly. By your third year, you took Southridge to the state semifinals and almost upset the state championship team, Merritt Island, in their stadium. You had a running back named Tony Smith who really started a whole tradition of great running backs for you. Talk about that great team in 1979.
Oh man, that was, I messed that team up. I didn't know enough. I mean, I was, when you always think, when you get a head job, you think you're ready for it, but you're really not. I had coached defense my first 9 years. I coached defense. And before I got the Southridge job, Vagoda said, I want you to run the offense. I want you to run my offense. And he was running an I offense. Right. And I said, I don't know anything about offense. I said, I've been coaching defense ever since I started, And I said, and we were good at it. We ran a monster slant defense, and we were very good at it. And that's what I really studied. And he says, well, I want you to coach it. So that spring, before I took the Southridge job, I coached the offense for Chris. And so there was a guy, Freddie Goldsmith, who was a head coach at Duke, and he was with Kenny Hatfield. He's been around, and he was at Florida A&M with Rudy Hubbard. And they won the national championship. They had just won
the AA championship.
Yeah, they had just won the national championship. And Freddie and I went to Gables Elementary. Freddie and I knew each other. And I called Freddie up. I said, listen, the guy wants me to coach offense. I said, I know nothing about it. I know you guys are running an I offense, a slot I. I said, I need to come up and study that. Could you introduce me to Rudy Hubbard? Well, he did. He introduced me to Rudy, and I started going to Florida A&M University. That summer I went up, and Rudy, he introduced me to Rudy, and Rudy started teaching me the offense. And I went back 6 spring practices and 2 summers, and that's where I learned the I offense. That's where I learned. And Rudy recruited Archie Griffin,
Right.
and and Archie Griffin won the Heisman Trophy with their signature play, which was the sprint draw, the fast sprint draw. And I learned that offense from Rudy, and I brought it back here. And we had usually the top rusher in the county every single year. Tony Smith held the record for like 12 years.
12 years.
And I used to take Tony Smith out after the first series of the third quarter because he'd have 200 yards sometimes in the first half. That's how good he was. Tony Smith was as good as any of the guys I've ever coached in Miami, actually. He just kind of did it a little bit different. He didn't have a great work ethic, and he was just super, super talented. And he was something else. He was something else because Buster Rhymes and
Freddie Miles. Right?
Freddie Miles, and Tony Smith was the lead rusher in the county that year as a junior. So he was a special guy. Then we went up and played Merritt Island for the state championship, and it was like the Twilight Zone because it was a foggy night, and you couldn't, when they sent film, we were studying their film, it was hard to see what they were running. They were an 8-man front defense, and I didn't really have enough stuff at that time. I wasn't into my unbalanced packages and different things. And we wound up losing by a touchdown to them.
But you had the lead in the fourth quarter.
Oh, yeah. But we fumbled a kickoff, and they went in, and they scored on a speed option. And, yeah, we should have won. We should have won the game. I fought myself then because Stu Rogers was actually the quarterback on that team. And he was special. Mon Perez was a great receiver on that team, had great defensive players, Ralph Frith and Anthony Lumpkin. We had great players. If I would have coached that team at the end when I went back the second time, we would have walked through the state. We would have won the state. Wow. That's how good they were.
By 1983, you may have had probably your best team, or what looks like might have been your best team. You had a team that played in the state championship game against Bradenton Manatee. You were playing at Tamiami Stadium. You had the lead. Fourth quarter, I think there was a very controversial play in that game where the Manatee quarterback looked like he fumbled the snap, but they gave Manatee a mulligan on a inadvertent whistle. Yeah.
That's right. It was an inadvertent whistle. He did fumble it. He came out. It was reverse pivoting. It flipped back to the 6-yard line. Sam Mizrarini, who's a fireman here, might be getting ready to retire, jumped on the ball. They ran off the field. Our kids ran off the field. We ran on, and Julius Caesar Williamson was the official, blew a whistle. It was an inadvertent whistle. And he said, you can't, they gave him back the ball, and they scored on like a 4th and 1. They kicked off to us, and we drove it down to the 10-yard line, and Tom ran out, and they won the game.
That's a tough way to lose.
Yeah, 27-21.
But better things were ahead for you. You get a call from Howard Schnellenberger. Can you tell us about that after that?
Oh yeah, I was at the convention. It's funny because I was at the convention in Dallas, and I saw Howard checking into the hotel, and that the convention was at, and I was talking to him a little bit. After I got back from the convention, I had a wood deck out in front of our house. And I was putting a wood deck in, and I was, building it, and I get a call from him on that Sunday. I left the convention like on a Saturday and got back, and I was working on a Sunday. And he said to me, this is after we had lost the state championship, and they had just won the national championship in '83. And he calls me, he says, Don, he says, this is Howard Schnellenberger. I said, hey, Coach, how you doing? He said, I just saw you. You enjoyed the convention? Yeah. He says, can you come in and talk to me? I said, sure, I'd love to. I said, I'm working outside. Let me jump in the shower. I jumped in the shower, went over, and he says, listen, he says, Mike Archer just took a job at LSU. He's going to LSU with Orangebarger. I'm going to make Tom Olivadotti the secondary coach. He says, I want you to come in and coach linebackers. He says, you want to do that? I had no idea. I mean, I didn't even apply for the job. I didn't know anything.
Oh,
So I said, yeah. I said, yeah, I think so. I said, I got to talk to my wife, but I said, I think I'd like to do that, you know.
Mm.
And I had a great team coming back. They went to the state finals
Mm.
the next year too,
Right.
you know, and lost in the state finals. And so I said, yeah, I said, let me talk to my wife, you know. And he says, what are you making? I said, I didn't even know what I was making. So I gave him, you know, I threw out a figure. He says, oh, we can do that. He says, I'll give you a car too. I said, okay. You know, I didn't know what I was making. And he says, you got any other questions? I said, yeah. I said, what about retirement? Is there a good retirement plan? And he pulls the pipe out of his mouth and he says, I don't want to talk to anybody that wants to retire. I said, well, forget that one, you know. And so I went back. I talked to him. I said, when do you need to know by? He says, 10 o'clock tonight. 10 o'clock tonight. I thought I turned that off. You hear that?
I didn't hear anything.
What? I thought I turned it off. Okay. 10 o'clock tonight. And, and, and so I went back, talked to Phyllis, and I said, hey, you know, I just got offered the job at University of Miami. And she had her business at the time, doing very well. She was doing very well. And so she says, yeah, she says, you want to do it? Go ahead and do it. So I called back and said, yeah, I'm going to do it. I went in, resigned, and went back to Miami, you know, and I check in, and they didn't even give me an office. They just put a plane ticket in my hand and said, you're off. And I went to Pittsburgh. I was in Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Philadelphia. I was doing it was during recruiting, the end of recruiting. So I was looking, you know, checking in on Archer's kids up there. And I didn't see Phyllis till end of February, till February.
Well, it's interesting. You got to coach only the spring practice with Howard because Howard took what was supposed to be a USFL job, but it just never materialized. In comes Jimmy Johnson, and one of the conditions that Jimmy had to agree to was he had to retain Howard's staff, which included yourself. And the very first meeting, there was some tension in the room.
To say the least.
The old story of Jimmy Johnson telling the story about when Tom Olivadotti kept dropping the keys on the table. Can you talk about that day?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. You know, Howard leaves. You know, usually when a staff leaves, you know, the whole staff has changed. And you know, I just gave up a great high school job. I was telling you, that team that lost a state to Manatee went back the next year and lost to Pensacola Woodham team. You know. The next year, but so I'm figuring, hey, I'm not even going to have a job. You know, I didn't even know if I was going to have a job or not. So and all these guys, well, all these guys are always calling people and talking to people and everything because they're always lining up jobs in case they get fired. I didn't, you know, I don't know anything about that. I'm a ball coach. That's all I want to do is coach ball. But anyway, I'm sitting there. We're in the airport Marriott, and around a big table, and Sam Jankovic brings Jimmy in, and Jimmy starts talking to us. And Jimmy never really even met any of us. He didn't even meet any of us, you know. So it's a very awkward situation, you know. And Tom Olivadotti, you know, he starts talking, and Tom's not even looking at him. He just keeps dropping the keys on the table. And Jimmy was really kind of calm about the thing. I don't know. He handled it pretty good. I would have been really upset if I was doing. You know, if you're talking to somebody, you know, you pay attention to them. You're looking at them, you know, and you're talking to them. And he kept dropping it. And I love Tom, and I like Gary Stevens, and they both wanted the job at the time. And it was just a very uncomfortable situation for me, and I didn't know what was going on. Then they go back to the office, and Jimmy starts interviewing guys. The next day, I'm the first guy he interviews. I'm in there 5 minutes. I mean, what do you just tell me what you want? You know, what do you want me to do? You know, and I said, I can't wait till we start coaching ball and talking football and talking X's and O's. Fine. Next guy goes in there, and the guy's in there for 2 hours. He never met the guy before. You know, Jimmy didn't meet the guy, you know, in 2 hours. Next guy goes in, he's an hour, 45 minutes. The other guy, they're all in there for an hour, hour and 15, hour and a half, 2 hours. I said, what are you guys talking about? He said, they're talking about salary. They're talking about recruiting areas. They're talking about what their responsibility. They're talking business.
Right.
I'm not a business guy. I'm a ball coach. I was a high school ball coach, so I didn't know any of that stuff. I just wanted to get going, and that's the way my college career started, But it was a very uncomfortable year. And Jimmy will tell you sometimes when he sees me, he says, "Tell those guys what it's like the first year." I said, "It wasn't very fun. It wasn't fun because everybody, you'd be walking down the hallway and the door had slammed. Everybody was talking behind closed doors and things. It was not a very comfortable situation."
Well, it was a rough first year, but you obviously righted the ship after that '84 season, and you win a national championship in '87.
Mm-hmm.
And then in '88, you have another 11-1 season. Had that controversial Catholic versus convicts game in Notre Dame, but
should have won that.
Could have easily won another national championship. But in January of '89, Jimmy Johnson gets hired by the Dallas Cowboys, and he decides he's going to bring a lot of his guys with him. Did he ever approach you about going to Dallas?
Well, there were 6 guys I think originally went with him. Joe Brodsky and Axe, and he took 6 guys with him, Butch, and so I was for some reason I was in Vegas for some reason. I don't know if I was recruiting out there or something like that. It was after recruiting, and Jimmy was out there, and he asked me about what Phyllis did. We never really talked much, because Jimmy was Jimmy's guys, Dave Wanstead and Paul Jett and all these guys, that he brought in. Butch were more Jimmy's guys, I was kind of like in the book, I was the high school guy,
Guy.
So I wasn't really a Jimmy guy. I'm a lot closer to Jimmy, I'm not close to Jimmy, but I, like at the Hall of Fame, I went up to the stage and he came over and stuff like that. He was surprised that I was there. I'm glad I went, because he was a big part of my career, But, but anyway, what were you asking me? I forgot the question. What?
Did he approach you about going to Dallas?
Yeah. Oh, so anyway, I was in Vegas with him, and so he said to me, he had asked me about Phyllis, and after I got let go, because when Erickson came in, he brought 6 guys with him, and it was myself, Tommy Tuberville, and myself were the guys that were left when Jimmy went to Dallas. And I knew I wasn't going to get the job, because when Jimmy went to Dallas, one of the ADs told me, if Gary Stevens gets a job, you're going to be okay. But if Gary Stevens doesn't get the job, you're not going to have a job. Now, he tells me this the day Jimmy leaves. And Jimmy tells me when he's leaving that day that he said, Gary's not getting the job. I recommended Gary and Sam's not giving him a job. So I knew I wasn't going to be there. I mean, I was already told that the first day. I said, how do you guys know that? I was really leery about it. So I kind of kept a diary on the thing. But anyway, that's sure enough, that's what happened, and Tuberville had just gotten hired. Jimmy, he didn't even coach. He was a volunteer with us, Tommy.
Right.
And Art, was right there. So he comes in, he lets me go, Erickson lets me go, keeps Tommy and keeps Art. And then the 7th guy comes in. The 7th coach comes in the next day. It's a long story,
Was it Ed Orgeron, by the way?
No, it was a guy, Craig Bray, that coached the secondary. But they went a coach short. Orgeron was a GA, and Orgeron was coaching the defensive line, and they worked it out. But they went a coach short the first year and didn't hire me. They let me go. So it was kind of a fishy situation. But, I worked for the Dolphins that year, and then I wound up getting the Southridge job again. And things work out for the best. But it was a very sticky situation. But Jimmy called me when I got let go that night. He called from Dallas. He says, if you want to come out, he says, I'll make room for you. He says, I'll give you a job if you want to come. But like I told you, Phyllis had a great job. My wife had a great job. She had her own business. And, we had acquired some properties and things like that. And I said, no, I'm going to stick it out here. Thanks. I appreciate it. I wish them good luck, and went from there. Because I didn't know how long we were going to stay. The one thing about coaching on the college level, I used to go to a national convention every single year. There were always guys shaking hands in the lobby looking for jobs. Because you always, guys are fired, and new staffs come in. And I said, I never wanted to be in that situation. That's one of the reasons I kind of stayed in Miami. I didn't want to, subject my kids to that, my wife to that. I said, hey, I'm going to stay here and make my way here and do what I had to do here, coaching wise. So that's what I did. I stayed here.
Now, you just mentioned that you spent a year working with the Dolphins as a scout.
Mm-hmm.
Then you returned to Southridge, and this time it's a little bit different. Before your first stint, you were establishing the culture. Now the culture has already been established. Now you're just taking it to another level, and you had probably one of the great runs in Dade County history. I mean, that '93 team might be one of the best I've ever seen.
Well, that's considered it was voted the team of the '90s.
Yeah.
One of the best teams. I think the Gables team in the '60s, that 68 or 64 Gables team, was voted the best team of the century. But I would have put that team up against any team. Or that team in the '90s was unbelievable. But I came back, and the reason we were good, and I tell everybody this, and this is one thing I learned from Jimmy and everything else. If you want to be good, you're a CEO or you're a head of a company or you're a head coach, you better surround yourself with really, really good people. And I had, when I went back, Mike Shapiro was still there. Steve Albers was there. Cliff McRae was there. Stu Rogers was there. All these guys Rodney Hunter, all these guys that I had coached or been with. I had such a great staff. It was unbelievable. The staff was all intact. I just walked in and it was like I never left, so once we started rolling, once I got back, it was the first year was a little rocky. I think we went 6-4. There was, there were some bad apples when I first got back. They weren't, they didn't fit the culture that we wanted. But, after that, we just started rolling. I mean, we were really, really good. It was hard to beat us. We were so good. I never even got, Mike used to meet, they used to meet on the weekends by himself and his staff, the defensive staff. I didn't even get involved with the defense. I did the overall purchasing and all the things that a head coach does, and the offense. I've worked with the offense, but and I would give Mike suggestions if he asked for it. But Mike was a brilliant guy, and he was he was a head coach after I left,
right?
So he was a brilliant guy, and Joe Barantovich and all these guys, they were just great coaches, and they, I just let them go. You let them go and just keep them out of the end zone. That's what they did.
Well, after another great run at Southridge, Butch Davis gets the job at Miami, and all of a sudden, you guys join Butch's staff, but you guys are right behind the eight ball. The NCAA strips you of 31 scholarships due to the I guess the Pell Grant investigation and everything.
Mm-hmm.
How were you able to rebuild that program so quickly? I mean, you took your lumps. 97, I think you went 5-6 that year. That was some rough games, rough times. But you got the ship back on track and won another national championship in 01. How were you able to do it?
Butch Davis was a big part of that. I mean, he's a great recruiter. Great part of it. But it was tough. It was funny that you talk about that, because I was just at the FIU game. Saturday, and he has a heck of a football team. And I was up in the patio area there, and Tammy was there, his wife, and we were talking about when we first got back to Miami how hard it was. I didn't realize how bad it was.
They flew a banner over to the stadium saying,
get rid of them, and he used to get
champs.
calls. Butch used to get calls, And Tammy was saying what he said. She never saw Butch as angry as that, at anybody. He usually keeps a pretty cool demeanor. He says it was really upsetting. He says it was very difficult the first years. And he kind of knew, Butch was super creative with track scholarships. We try to work things out, like Santana Moss. Some of the guys that we brought in would come in on track scholarships and things like that. And, we just started getting some great ball players. It was unbelievable. But he's a great recruiter. And, we had a pretty good staff. He put together a pretty good staff. And like I did at Southridge, I mean, the people that are working with you are the keys to the thing. And once he got, the big thing for Butch, once we got the weight room going, when he hired Tommy Moffitt, who's at LSU, he's been at LSU for a while, and Andrew Swayze, it took off from there. Our kids loved them in the weight room and worked hard, and we just took off from there. But that was the only losing season I had at Southridge. Was at 6-7, but we only had like 52 guys on scholarship, at the time, and we're playing guys, teams with 85, and makes a big difference. When we would lose guys, we're playing walk-ons that they couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. Some of the guys we were playing with.
I want to wind down with a couple of things here.
Mm-hmm.
During your stint in Miami, you just had an amazing success of running backs, one after another. Danielle Ferguson, James Jackson, Clinton Portis, Willis McGahee, Frank Gore, all the way down to Tyrone Moss and Jarrett Payton. How were you able to get all that talent together and keep those egos in check and was there enough footballs for those guys? Or
it's funny. It's kind of like that, like a UCLA in basketball. When they won all those championships, to recruit guys to come in, they always had talented guys. Like I was telling you earlier, I wanted guys that were competitive guys, that wanted to compete, that had an aspiration to go to the next level, and that were willing to go to work. They had character enough where they roll up their sleeves. They had a great work ethic and go to work. And at the time, people were going with one back. They'd bring in a back, and that back would be the featured back, and you wouldn't see the other guys. But I felt, that college football is so tough, and some of the schedules we had were so tough that you needed some kind of depth there. And so I used to tell the kids, I said, you just learn it. I said, don't complain. You're going to get an opportunity to play. I said, don't mess your opportunity up, because you might not see the field again, because the guy behind you might be as good or better than you. And so the kids really studied the game. And I was really, the biggest thing for me, a lot of guys can run the pill, but they don't want to pass protect. They're not good pass protectors. And all my guys, I said, you want to play at this place, learn the protections and become a great pass protector, and you'll play for me.
I think that's one of the reasons that your players seem to make the adjustment to the NFL faster than players from other schools, is that they knew what to do when they didn't have the ball. Such as what you said, pass protection and everything.
Pass protection, running routes. Running routes is the last thing that comes, probably, because most of them can run the ball. Once you teach them their reads and things like that, their initial reads in the running game. Now it's just don't miss your first read, and then go from there. Once you make one move, get north and south, and go to the end zone. But if you can pass protect, you're going to be in the league a long time. And those guys all knew it. Matter of fact, I tell a story about Frankie, when he first came in. He says, you think I can play? I said, well, I wouldn't recruit you if you can't play. I said, you're probably as good as anybody we have running a ball. I said, you're going to have to learn the pass protection. So the first night, he gets the playbook, and he says, what do I need to learn? I said, well, here's the put-in schedule. These are the pass protections. And we had a lot of pass protections. We didn't have just the 2 or 3 pass protections. We had quite a few. And I said, you got to learn these pass protections. At about 2:30 in the morning, I get a phone call. Hey, Coach. I said, who's this? He says, Frank Gore. I said, Frank Gore? I said, what, you okay, man? Did you get hurt? What happened? He said, no. He says, I just learned all the pass protections. I want you to quiz me. I said, no, not tonight. I said, I'll quiz you later on. That's Frank Gore. That's how special he was. He learned all the pass protections in one night.
Well, recently, one of your former players, Edgerrin James, was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he went out of his way during his speech to single you out as the guy who really kind of helped develop his game. How did that make you feel?
But you know what? It's nice to be a small part of that, but that guy is a special. I've always said it ever since I met the guy. He's a different kind of cat. He really is. He's a very special guy. I was glad to be a small part of his success, because I'm not a very big part. I just convinced him that he was as good as anybody I've ever coached. He could do it all. He could block, he could run, and he could catch. And he's smart. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't like making mistakes. And what he talked about in the Hall of Fame about how to protect his family and protect the quarterback, that's the way he is. He's a special guy, man. He really is. And I was honored to be a part of that, just a small part of that.
Well, Coach, back in 1974, you wrote a paper called Attitude of a Champion, and it's something that you gave every single player that you've coached. Now, near the end of the piece, there's a poem called The Law of the Jungle by Kipling.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here, but I want you to recite the poem for us.
Okay. This is the law of the jungle, as old and as true as the sky. And the wolf that shall keep it may prosper, but the wolf that shall break it must die. As the creeper that girdled the tree trunk, the law runneth forward and back. For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. And I think it's an ultimate team poem. I mean, you always taking care of the people that are with you, and you lift up the guys that, and we talked about this a little bit about the culture at Miami. It's lifting up those freshmen. They don't come in. I mean, they don't have anything to say because they haven't done anything yet, even though they're great players coming out of high school. Lift them up and show them the culture that needs to be so you can stick a ring on their finger.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for joining us. You've been an awesome guest today.
I hope so. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jay.
For Ghost of the Orange Bowl, I'm Jay Rao. We'll see you again soon.